On April 19th, Jasper National Park held its annual public forum at the Jasper Activity Centre. The forum featured an open house, a 2022 year-in-review presentation by Jasper Field Unit Superintendent Alan Fair, and themed tabletop discussions. BCTV spoke with Superintendent Fair and several Parks Canada personnel on a number of topics. Well, we're here with Alan Fair, who's the Jasper Field Unit Superintendent for Parks Canada here in Jasper National Park. Mr. Fair, first of all, can I ask you, what are we doing here today? What's the purpose of this event?
Well, Parks Canada develops management plans for all national parks across the country, and on an annual basis we report back to the public, and we like to give people the opportunity to share their ideas, their recommendations, their thoughts or concerns. And so that's for tonight. It's an opportunity for us to share some information from the past year and to hear what people have to say.
The amount of visitation really came back in a strong way in 2022, almost to pre-pandemic levels. I think 2.4 million visitors is what I saw in the report. There's a frustration with being from Valemount. We have a lot of locals that use the park as well, and families and things, but trying to get reservations into the front country, into the back country campgrounds. And I see that Parks Canada has implemented a new system for reservations. I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what your hopes are for this new system and why it might be a better experience for visitors.
Well, visitation has grown over the last 10 years by about 17%. So the numbers of people that are wanting to come and camp in the front country and in the back country has risen dramatically. And the system that we had originally wasn't able to handle the numbers in some circumstances. And the company that operates that system has made some adjustments to it, some technical changes, so that this year we've actually had a record number of reservations for March for both backcountry and front country, and it's worked flawlessly. So I think all the bugs that we had from the large numbers of people trying to access the reservation system have been dealt with effectively.
Okay, and so you feel that that's going to make it a little bit easier. Will there still be a policy of holding back a few, not booking out every site so that some of the locals perhaps can get away once in a while during the summer?
Well, we tend to hold back some sites for later arrivers, or if there's an emergency of some sort, there's some circumstance that requires it. But generally speaking, people need to reserve. And the issue is that the demand is so tremendously high versus the supply that we really, the only way that we can try to address it in a reasonably fair fashion is through the reservation system. So I don't encourage anybody to count on having a few sites left for them at the end of the day. It's important that you plan ahead, you use a reservation system, and then you can be certain that you're going to have a campsite to use.
Okay. I want to switch gears and talk about Strategy 2, which is listed as true-to-place experiences. And there's a subcategory there called Visitor Use Management. So this, as you know, has been a hot-button topic in the Banff and Lake Louise area, and Moraine Lake, and Lake Louise in particular, in terms of controlling the amount of visitation and how visitors can access that. Does Parks Canada have any plans for visitor use management in Jasper National Park? And if so, can you give us an outline of what that might be?
As I mentioned a moment ago, visitation has increased dramatically over the last 10 years. It's been up 17%. And like we've seen in places like Banff, Lake Louise in particular, or Moraine Lake, there's other places across the country where there's large numbers of visitors that are exceeding the capacity of the park or the historic site. So in those cases, and just broadly because of the growing population, the growing demand, we need to develop strategies that allow us to manage the day-to-day congestion and traffic issues that might develop, but also to think ahead as to what kind of infrastructure needs do we need to, what kind of infrastructure needs do we have, what kind of active transport solutions might there be to minimize the number of vehicles going into an area versus shuttle buses or bikes or walkers. So Jasper is going to be developing a vast visitor use management strategy to help us think through what we can do to try to get people into these important sites like Moraine Lake, like in the case of Jasper, Lake Annette and Mount Edith Cabal. We want people to be able to get there. We want them to have a good experience. So how can we do that? And we've been trying a variety of different methods over the last couple of years, whether it's things like flaggers and an app called Jasper Now, those types of things to try to help people plan their days so that they can have a good experience. And that's one of the topics for today is the visitation. And we'd like to hear what people have to, what thoughts that they have. Like, are there things that we could be doing that might help increase their the enjoyment of their stay or of their visit to a particular location?
Right. Let's talk about trail management. I mean, a lot of our residents in Vail Mountain and the Robson Valley come here to do hiking and camping as well. There seems to have been a lot of activity in terms of trail maintenance, trail upgrades, trail repairs that have been done in this past year. Are there any new projects being considered for this year or already on the books for this year?
Yeah, there's a whole host of backcountry projects. One of the tables is about trails, and there's a poster that lists some of the projects planned for this year. One of them is finishing the Jacques Lake reroute because we've had flooding at the trailhead. Similar, we did a lot of mechanical thinning to reduce wildfire risk. So we've rerouted what's called Trail 8C. We've always got a number of bridges that are in need of repair. So the Brazeau Loop is one of our most popular backcountry trails, and we're going to be reconstructing a bridge in there that it washed out last year.
One of the organizations in our area is called YORA, the Yellowhead Outdoor Recreation Association, but here in Jasper you have the Friends of Jasper National Park. They've been really helping out a lot in terms of volunteers with some of the trails maintenance in the winter and in the summertime as well. Has that been a good help for Parks Canada? Yeah,
well, it's been a tremendous help. They've just a couple of years back, they finished a trail project up on Whistler Mountain, and they've been working with us. They work with us on an annual basis, and they come to us with a list of projects that they're interested in. We discuss it with them, and then we approve a suite of work projects for them. One of the big ones for us is related to the Great Divide Trail and part of the Moline Pass Trail. So they've been working closely with the Great Divide Trail Association, and we authorized them to do some work, mostly brush clearing in the Moline Pass, Moline Lake area.
Well, we're here with James McCormick, who is a human-wildlife conflict and coexistence specialist with Parks Canada at Jasper National Park. James, I have a question for you with regards to roadkill. So roadkill continues to be a problem here in this park, as well as every park, of course. What action is Parks Canada considering taking this year in 2023 or in future years to help reduce wildlife losses and enhance public safety?
So we're trying to continue on with our keeping motorists informed that wildlife are on the roads. It could be on the roads at any time. Wildlife will just cross. That's a natural behavior for them to move across there. Sometimes they're attracted to the highways because of a grain spill, or sometimes in the winter because of salt action. And same with the railways too. They get grain spills along there as well. So what we're doing is we're trying to have good sight lines for motorists so they can see anything that's on the side of the road. We're trying to have good speed zones. So we have 70-kilometer-hour zones through the park where we know if wildlife have had incidents, collisions before. And now we've introduced radar signs, where the flashing signs that just reminds motorists that this is an area that wildlife may occur, and we ask them to slow down and to be more aware of it. The other one we ask is when there's a wildlife jam going on, we ask people, because when you pull over on the side of the road, your traffic can block the view of wildlife that might be crossing there. So we're asking people not to try and block the wildlife from crossing or from obstructing the visibility of other motorists there. Because I think with the increased number of visitors, the increased enthusiasm for visitors to see wildlife, we'll ask them if they do have to stop to pull over safely, if there's no other vehicles there and they're not kind of interfering with the wildlife. But then if it starts to get busy, we ask people to quickly safely drive off if they can, and just give that wildlife some space as well as not interfere with traffic movement and, again, the safety of those wildlife. Animals that spend that much time comfortable around people and comfortable around traffic has that increased risk of potentially crossing that road and getting struck.
Right. Do you want to give a shout out to those people with all their cameras now on their phones and people getting out and trying to get close to animals to take pictures?
Yeah, and we do encourage people to have a chance to see wildlife in Jasper, and we have some beautiful roads that aren't quite as busy as the highway, like Highway 16 or Highway 93. So the drive up to Moline Lake is a beautiful drive, and it's one of the ones I always recommend people go to see wildlife. You can see 2 different species of bear, bighorn sheep, deer, moose, elk, so that's a great place to go if you actually want to watch wildlife. And then people aren't in as much of a rush. So there are places that you can go from your vehicle to watch wildlife safely for yourself and safely for them.
Right. Has there been any consideration with regards to going back to roadkill and that question that we asked you earlier, to doing any kind of crossings as they've done in Banff Park?
We are doing research into where, if we were to put crossing structures, where would be the best places to do that. And that's a combination of where the animals are and then the engineering side of things, which isn't my expertise. We looked at how effective it has been in Banff and now into Yoho, so it is something that's on our radar. We don't have any imminent plans for this, but we're definitely doing some research. If it does happen in the future, we'll be prepared for it. Right.
Well, the highway geography is a little different here. In Banff, you've got twinned highways and you've got straight roads. Here, single, two-way traffic and very narrow kind of crossing.
Yeah, so it's a different sort of system there. I think you've got their highways built for that big volume of traffic there. Here, I think we've made some improvements with passing lanes and stuff to make that traffic flow a little bit easier and hopefully allow people to travel at appropriate speeds without being as frustrated. So, yeah, moving that direction, yeah.
All right, we're here with Katie Ellsworth, who's the fire management professional here with Jasper National Park. Katie, I have a couple questions for you with regards to the programs that Jasper National Park continues with its tree thinning and fire guard creation around. What are the plans for this year in terms of that, if you're doing any more of that type of work, and also the prescribed burns that are happening for 2023?
Our wildfire risk reduction program in Jasper is focused, of course, on safety. Safety is always our first priority, the safety of the community, the safety of our visitors, the safety of the communities outside of the park, Valemont, Hinton, etc. Our core season for our wildfire risk reduction program is the fall and winter months, so when those grounds are frozen and there's snow on condition. We just completed several wildfire risk reduction projects. We completed some around Pyramid Lake Resort, Patricia Lake Lodge, and then we worked on the creation of a landscape level fire guard along Signal Mountain. So that's a fire guard that's intended to guard the community from any fires that may arise and proceed to the community from the east. So for now, because we sort of ended in that winter condition, our wildfire risk reduction program sort of goes on pause for the fire season, and then we start again into the fall and winter. So we'll continue again into the fall, November, December, and we have projects assigned to continue with that wildfire risk, the community fire guard, along Signal Mountain, and then we'll continue to treat some of the outlying commercial accommodation and the other sort of infrastructure pieces that are outside the main component of the town site.
Okay. And what about prescribed burns? Is there anything on the books for this year?
Yep, Jasper is embarking on their prescribed fire program again. We're sort of starting out in prescribed fire season. This spring we have the Razorback unit for the Douglas Fir Slopes prescribed fires on schedule. That's approximately a 30 hectare unit that's located to the west of the community, and that one's geared to help restore Douglas fir habitat, because Douglas fir is at the northern edge of its extent in Jasper, and we want to restore the habitat for that tree. As well, it enhances our wildfire risk reduction or community protection, because that Douglas fir habitat, those really tall trees with that nice grassy understory where you can sort of walk around nicely and not get poked in the face. Those are nicer, more fire-resistive pieces of ecosystems, so that's what we're trying to restore that to assist in the community protection. The other one that we have is South Esk, and that's sort of a remote area to the east portion of the park, It's a larger unit, it's about 400 hectares, and again, we're working towards protection of communities, so there's a potential that fires could exit the park through that valley into Alberta, and we're restoring habitat and just sort of helping to renew a natural fire cycle in Jasper, which we have seen in decline due to fire suppression activities over the last several 50 years or so.
Okay, well, let's talk about the major fire that happened in 2022, the Chettaman fire. Obviously, way beyond imagination in terms of how it unfolded and what resources went into fighting it and how it affected the town. What can you say about what lessons were learned from that fire?
One of the things we learned from the fire is that we've done a really good job at connecting with our municipal partners and really planning for those community impacting events, that potential for community evacuation. We've done several tabletop exercises and have worked with our community partners so that we were in a better place when the power did actually get impinged and the power failed for the community. We were very close to our community partners and able to really work with them to sort of best assess the relative risk to our community. In terms of the wildfire, we've learned several things. I mean, there's obviously internal operational things that we can always do better with, as with any other operation. But we've learned that, with the effects of climate change and the increases we're seeing in our overall fire season, that we can't really expect what was traditional 10 or 15 years ago, because climate change is changing the way we operate. And having a large fire like that in Jasper isn't terribly common, and having a fire that's largest growth, one of its big growth days was into the end of October, is not very common. And that's really largely driven by some pine beetle impacts, as well as just overall weather conditions and weather impacts. It was a very, very hot September and October, which led to this progression of this large wildfire.
What can you do in terms of improving the situation in terms of less fires and how you fight them?
Parks Canada takes climate change very carefully, as well as the safety of our community and our visitors, so we are working to create a more fire-resistive landscape, is what we're calling it. So a landscape that's not necessarily prone to these really large wildfire events. We do that by creating fire guards, we do that by implementing prescribed fires in small areas, because it kind of makes a patchwork quilt, if you will, of sort of burned areas and open areas and treed areas, so that we have boundaries that we can work with in our advantage when we're doing fire operations. Parks Canada sees fire as a natural ecological process. Just like snowfall and rain and avalanches, this, like you said, is a process that's just been with the earth for as long as the earth's been around. So we do allow fires in certain areas to sort of burn naturally. So we have a zoning system within Parks Canada, and Jasper is no different. So we have this red zone around the community and pieces of high infrastructure and roadways where it's absolute suppression activities. We don't really want fires there. We have a yellow zone that's a little more of that intermediate zone, and Chettaman did burn into a lot of that intermediate zone in the Snake Indian Valley, and that's why we were able to, in that area, just sort of let the fire do its natural activity. One, because it would be a much more extensive effort to suppress that extra fire line in a really challenging condition for our crews, but also, like I said, because we see fire as an ecological process, and we have suppressed fire for so long in Parks Canada properties that it's resulted in this overstocking of pine forests.
So it is a bit of a challenge in terms of the things aligning. So climate change making hotter, drier conditions, increased visitation, increased backcountry use. Those are all fire risks, obviously, that have to be managed. Is there any plans for doing anything larger in terms of fire management strategy that people can get involved with?
In terms of an overall strategy, Parks Canada has seen an increase in fire like everywhere else in the country because of climate change and the things you mentioned. So we've made big increases in our fire crew capacity here in Jasper, and that's something that's continuing to evolve through our National Fire Management Committee and Division, that we're trying to adapt to climate change. And that's something that's not unique. British Columbia has suffered for the last several years with long and extensive challenging fire seasons. Alberta is no different. So we're all just sort of learning and sharing our best practices and doing our very best to ensure that we're able to protect the infrastructure that's important. However, it's important to remember that Parks Canada has invested a lot into fire programs across the country, and in Jasper specifically, that includes doubling our fire crew capacity. We had one fire crew prior to 2020, now we have two. We have a long-term fire helicopter that's stationed here in the key months, and there's extra fire resources sort of in that support function in the office. My staff has actually increased, so we're increasing our capacity so that we can be more effective.
Are you proud of the work that you're doing in terms of minimizing risks, as well as the monumental effort that went into fighting the Chettaman fire?
I'm beyond proud of the effort that we put into minimizing the risk and the effort that we put into the Chettaman wildfire. The impacts to the community were very significant, and most of us lived here. So we had to deal with the same impacts to the community and still go and continue day to day to fight the fire. So I'm very proud of my colleagues and all the hard work that we put into securing that fire and protecting our community.
So I wanted to talk about strategy number 5, which is managing development. And development, of course, is always a big thing in any national park, but no different here in Jasper. What, if anything, is being planned to help or create or make available additional staff housing here in Jasper?
Well, housing is a top priority for us. It affects our ability to recruit staff, and it affects our ability to retain staff. So over the last number of years, we've been implementing a housing strategy that we have. We've replaced a number of single-family dwellings with duplexes, with fiveplexes. Just recently, we gave the go-ahead on a large walk-up apartment on the main street in Jasper that will eventually hold 144 suites. So there's a variety of projects like that that we working on actively, and in the foreseeable future, we'll be working with the municipality and the Jasper Community Housing Association on these types of projects.
Great. So we're talking about managing development, and one of the areas that has been recently managed is the Tonquin Valley. A lot of our residents in the Robson Valley have used Tonquin Valley for many, many years for horsebacking trips and for general recreation. Can you tell us why the two operators, the two private operators, the lodges there, were bought out, and why was it done, and what impacts it might have in terms of the public accessing the Tonquin Valley?
The Tonquin Valley is one of our premier destinations in Jasper National Park, as you alluded to in your opening remarks. It's incredibly important that visitors always be able to access the Tonquin Valley. The Tonquin Valley will remain open for backcountry users, hikers, from mid-May to into the fall, until end of October, actually. So that remains the same and will continue. The reason that we have taken some of the management actions that you mentioned is all related to mountain caribou, which is a threatened species. It's a high priority species for the Government of Canada in terms of the Species at Risk Act and the desire to recover populations. Just recently, our minister announced that we were going to initiate a caribou conservation breeding program, and the result of that breeding program will be animals that we release into the Tonquin Valley. And we wanted to make sure that the disturbances associated with snowmobiles and various other types of activities are minimized. And this has been a long-standing evolution of management in the Tonquin, as we've been trying to grapple with the decline of caribou in that valley. So a number of years back, the winter part of the winter season was closed. We eventually expanded that winter season to make it longer. Now we're trying to ensure that there's minimal or no motorized traffic into that area, and that we're able to still provide some kind of opportunities for visitation through backcountry hiking.
We're here with Jean-Francois Bisseon, who is the Caribou Recovery Program Manager here with Parks Canada and Jasper National Park. Thank you very much for being here with us. Wanted to ask you a question about in the report under Strategy 1, Conserving Natural and Cultural Heritage for Future Generations. It talks about Park Canada's implementation of a caribou conservation program and the building of a caribou conservation breeding center here in the park. Could you talk about the details of those two items?
Yeah, for sure. So there's two important elements to your question. First, there's the what we call the recovery program in general. So for the past decades, we've implemented a number of recovery options or approaches or initiatives. For example, we're We have a speeding zone on the parkway. We have a strong monitoring program. We're protecting winter habitat in the park, and we're assessing all the projects through the Species at Risk Act. So this is a really strong commitment to protect caribou and caribou habitat. But in addition of that, we know that numbers are just too low for the populations to recover by themselves. We just simply don't have enough females for these populations to recover. So we spend a lot of time, many years, to explore options to recover those small herds. And what we're proposing to do is to use caribou conservation breeding. So essentially what we're doing is we're building a caribou conservation breeding center. We're going to bring caribou from outside Jasper and from Jasper. We're going to breed them. Essentially what we're going to do is release the offsprings every year for a number of years until we recover those small herds. And then we're going to turn our attention to the other small herds or populations in Jasper. So that's the program in a nutshell.
So where is it going to be constructed?
So the breeding facility will be located in Jasper, close to Athabasca Falls, along the Geraldine Fire Road. The facility is about 65 hectares in size, so about 92 soccer field. So it's quite large, and there's going to be a number of buildings, labs, handling barn, a number of pens. So we're going to be equipped essentially to manage a small herd of captive caribou, and then we're hoping to have about 120 animals in captivity at peak capacity and be able to release those yearlings every year to recipient herds.
Where is the initial breeding stock coming from?
Well, a number of options are on the table. So initially we're hoping to bring animals from Jasper, from the Tonquin and from the Brazeau herd, and we're in discussions with our partners, the provincial partners in Alberta and British Columbia, to find other source populations as well.
Okay. And what are the challenges in terms of caribou recovery and caribou breeding? Is it a very difficult process? I mean, I've seen it in other areas, in northern areas, but what would it be like here in Jasper?
Well, caribou are probably one of the most studied species, so tons of studies, tons of work. Caribou have been bred in captivity at a number of other facilities. If you go to the Calgary Zoo, for example, they have caribou in captivity there. We're working with the Large Animal Research Station in Alaska. They do have caribou there. Well, actually, they've had caribou for a number of decades, so there's a lot of knowledge there that we're learning from. We're working with colleagues from Finland, and they currently have a successful program there. So we're learning from a number of other projects, and we feel that we can be successful learning from different and various specialists across the world, actually.
Right. So people from our area, from Vail Mountain, the area there, are quite familiar with the Tonquin Valley herd, and we were quite pleased to actually see it make its way out to Yellowhead Lake last year. It was quite interesting. But there are other herds and populations throughout the park. Moline area is one. I can't recall the others, but what is the status of those herds? I think they're quite low. Is that correct?
Yeah, so currently there's 4 herds in Jasper National Park. So the first one north of the Jasper town site, called the Adaptation, that we co-manage or share with the province of Alberta. And south of the Jasper town site, we have the Tonquin, which has about 50, a little bit more than 50 animals. Then we have the Brazeau herd with less than 10 animals, and 2 other herds, the Maline and the Banff, located in Banff, are extirpated at this point. And that's why we're working really hard with this breeding program, so we can rebuild those populations over time.
So will they be placed back in those traditional areas?
If we're successful, that's the plan, but we're talking about several years before we get there.
When do you think the first repopulation effort will be taking place?
Well, we're hoping to bring our first caribou in captivity early 2025, and then shortly after, the year after, we're hoping to bring our first yearlings back into the Tonquin and rebuild that population over 5 to 10 years, up to 200 animals, and then we're going to turn our attention to the other populations.
Okay, so the strategy is to work on one at a time, not...
Exactly. Yeah.
And what challenges do you foresee with this program?
Well, there's many things that we need to pay attention to. So health and husbandry, for these captive animals. So this is extremely important. We do have a responsibility to make sure that they're healthy, they're well treated. So that's one of the challenge. We need to have a really strong monitoring program so we can understand and learn. And through adaptive management, we're hoping that we can learn and adapt along the way. So that's another challenge, working with partners, making sure that we have support through time. So having a strong communication program, we're working on that as well. And then, working with partners is extremely important.
Well, they're very much an at-risk species. What educational component, how would the public be able to keep track of the efforts? Will any portion of it be open to the public?
No, the facility by itself won't be open to the public for biosecurity reasons. So I just talked about the need to keep the captive animals healthy. So we're going to try to limit visitors to the facility. But there's plenty of other opportunities to learn about caribou. People can go on our website. We have brochures. We have information sessions. Like just again this morning, we had a session with school kids, talking about the program, talking about caribou. So there's numerous activities that we're doing to talk about this iconic species. So as we speak, we're kind of beefing up our communication program, and we're hoping to work with partners. Yeah.
And online, will there be a component, perhaps a birthing pen kind of fixed camera that people can tune into to see what's happening?
Well, we're currently looking into that, so that would be wonderful, actually.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That's my pleasure.
And final question for you with regards to Strategy 6, which is climate change and adaptation. The scientific modeling indicates that climate change is going to be leading to longer, hotter, and drier periods in Jasper National Park, of course, as in everywhere. Does Parks Canada have any strategies developed or that are being developed to help combat the climate change effects in the park?
Parks Canada has a climate change strategy team. They're based in our headquarters, and they work with us to develop strategies for each park and site. So over the ensuing years, all of these different sites and parks will have some form of strategy that we can then convert into a work plan, or even just a framework by which we can make decisions. So currently, when we're making decisions around bridges, we're increasing the sturdiness of the bridge to ensure that they can withstand flood events, because that's, you may know that in Mount Robson Provincial Park, a number of bridges were washed out the whole parts of the trail, and we've been experiencing that in other places across the country. And so the climate change strategy is something that we're using to help us determine what are the steps that we need to take to better manage our infrastructure, to better manage our backcountry system, and of course we're taking the measures that all Canadians should be doing to try to green our operation, whether it's through electric vehicles and trying to develop other alternative forms of energy.
Great, thank you very much for taking this time with us.
You're very welcome, thank you.
We'll begin the evening with a presentation from the Superintendent, Alan Fair. So welcome, Alan.
Can you turn this off?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for attending this annual forum, and bienvenue au Forum Public du Parc National Jasper. This evening, I'm going to provide an overview of some highlights of our achievements in the park in 2022. The content I'm going to present is also covered in the 2022 annual report, and I invite you to visit our website to download your own copy. So here you can see a few of the different stats that we picked out for today's presentation. We had 29,000 people that participated in in-person interpretive programs. We had 2.4 million visitors this past year, which is equivalent to pre-COVID numbers. And we, between the Friends of Jasper, who flat packed about 50 kilometers of trail, and our own 40 kilometers of cross-country ski trails, we had 90 kilometers of winter trail that were being managed this year. In 2022, the new 10-year management plan for Jasper National Park was approved in Parliament. The management plan acts as a roadmap for us and tells us how we will manage the park over the next 10 years. Jasper's management plan was developed with the input of Indigenous partners, stakeholders, and Canadians. And I'd like to thank all of you who took the time to share their comments on the development of this plan. The management plan was done in coordination with our other mountain national parks, and it includes the objectives and targets across several key strategy areas. This presentation and the annual report follows the structure of the new management plan and touches on the following key strategies. The first one is conserving natural and cultural heritage for future generations. The second is true to place experiences. Thirdly, strengthening Indigenous relations. Fourth, connect, collaborate, and learn together. Fifth, managing development. And sixth, climate change and adaptation. So with respect to the first theme, conserving natural and cultural heritage for future generations, the protection of natural and cultural resources and park landscapes are core to the reason for the park's existence, and maintaining and restoring ecological integrity is the first priority in park management. I'm going to touch on a few highlights from 2022, and as I mentioned, some of these are going to be found in our annual report. To start, in 2022, Jasper National Park completed consultations with scientists, researchers, Indigenous peoples, stakeholders, and Canadians on a conservation breeding program to help rebuild caribou populations. In 2023, the Government of Canada announced that the Parks Canada will implement a caribou conservation breeding centre in Jasper National Park. Construction began on the breeding centre, which is located just off Geraldine Road, this past month, and is expected to take approximately 2 years to complete. Parks Canada is also responsible for the protection and recovery of species at risk that occur within the national park. In 2022, we published a 5-year report on the implementation of the Multi-Species Action Plan for Jasper National Park. Of the 26 actions that were identified in the report, I'm pleased to report that we have completed half of the actions and made progress on all the others. For example, in 2022, Jasper National Park completed 2 prescribed fires, which improved important grassland habitat for species at risk, and staff planted over 4,000 whitebark pine seedlings. Whitebark pine is an endangered species. During the tabletop discussion portion of our session tonight, you will find booths on bears in the valley, caribou, species at risk, and aquatic invasive species that touch on this particular theme of natural and cultural heritage. And Jasmine's going to provide you with more information at the conclusion of my presentation. I'd just like to say that Jasmine did mention this, but we really are, we've set up the booths to make it easy for people to provide some suggestions and feedback to us on all these different topics. So please take advantage of that. True to place experiences. National parks provide exceptional opportunities for Canadians to develop a sense of connection to their natural and cultural heritage. The opportunity to be immersed in nature, history, and diverse cultures while surrounded by mountain landscapes is truly distinctive. Maintaining the authenticity and quality of this experience while ensuring that visitors understand its uniqueness is central to Parks Canada's mandate. Jasper National Park welcomed more than 2.4 million visitors during the 2022 calendar year. This represents an increase of approximately 200,000 over 2021 and signals a return to pre-pandemic levels. We also welcome nearly 470,000 campers. This figure represents a near return to pre-pandemic levels. The number of campers likely would have been higher, but the early closures of the campgrounds due to the wildfire in September. That forced the closure of all the major campgrounds in Jasper. Parks Canada is looking long-term at the current and emergent issues created by increasing visitation and working with partners to develop solutions to some of the challenges that arise and that enable us to still get Canadians out to these very special places. I just want to speak briefly about an app that was created just over the past year. Jasper has experienced a 17% increase in visitation over the last 10 years. As visitation arises, we continue to develop visitor use management strategies and tools to manage visitor congestion, demand, behavioral concerns, and safety issues to support quality experiences for visitors. So one of the tools that was launched this past year was the Jasper Now interactive web map. This site communicates parking availability in real time at highly visited day use areas such as Lake Annette to help manage expectations about congestion. I'm also pleased to report that efforts to improve inclusivity and accessibility were made in 2022. Park website content was updated with more pictures and descriptions of facilities. Washrooms replaced throughout the park received upgrades to meet accessibility and inclusivity standards, and 17 campsites at Whistler's Campground were converted to meet accessibility standards. So this evening we have booths on trails and visitation where you can get more information on these topics and, as I mentioned before, share thoughts and suggestions that you might have. Parks Canada and Indigenous peoples are partners in conserving natural and cultural heritage and sharing the stories of these treasured places. Jasper National Park works with more than 25 Indigenous groups connected to the park. One initiative that we undertook recently was related to Miette Campground, formerly known as Pocahontas Campground. The Jasper Indigenous Forum and Parks Canada agreed on Miette as a temporary name for a park campground, while discussions continue to find a permanent campground name that properly honors Indigenous cultures and connections to this park. Another major ongoing initiative is the Indigenous Exhibit Project. In 2022, construction continued on the Indigenous exhibit on the grounds of the Jasper National Park Information Center, right beside the CIBC building, with ongoing partner meetings to provide guidance and input throughout the process. There have been some delays, but construction on the project aims to be completed in 2023, this year, with an opening ceremony in September of this year. So we have a booth over in the corner related to Indigenous relations, and please feel free to make your way over there and hear more about the work that we're doing with our Indigenous partners. By connecting and collaborating with others, Parks Canada enhances the preservation, protection, and presentation of the park for present and future generations. In 2022, we played a lead role in the delivery of the Virtual Mountain Parks Peak Discovery Series, which reached 27,000 students across Canada. Topics include species at risk, climate change, fire and cultural history. This series is a collaboration between the Mountain National Parks, delivered on a virtual platform moderated by a company named Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. Jasper National Park also leverages its social media channels, newsletters, and website to communicate important information, including trail maintenance, updates, trip planning tips, avalanche control, and important updates on events like the Cheddar Fire, which we had last September. Some interesting stats for 2022. We had 2.2 million unique website page views. We have 35,000 Twitter followers and 67,000 Facebook fans. Managing development. This strategy encourages creative approaches to managing development that fosters park stewardship, incorporates sound sustainability practices, and cultivates a strong sense of place through sensitive design, redevelopment, and management of activities. This past year, Parks Canada issued 128 development permits and 23 building permits, including approval for 2 new apartment buildings along Connaught Drive, which will add 144 much-needed rental units to Jasper's housing stock. A building permit was issued for an 18-unit infill apartment on Patricia Street, which is currently under construction. A development permit for a second 18-unit infill apartment in the same area was also issued. Parks Canada Municipality began discussions last fall about sharing the responsibility for administration and land use planning and development within the town of Jasper. Consultation on this issue has been extended until midnight tonight, so make sure to stop by our realty and development table to have your say. And it's over in the corner. They're waving their hand, they're in the spotlight there. So if you have a thought related to land use planning and development and the discussion that we're having with the town of Jasper, feel free to go over there and you can share your comments or write down your comments, and they'll be included in the consultation process. Climate change and adaptation. Scientific modeling indicates climate change will lead to longer, hotter, and drier periods in the park. Climate change and other environmental forces challenge the integrity of ecosystems and the condition of natural and cultural resources. The impacts to these places are complex, and Parks Canada integrates climate change mitigation efforts and adaptation actions into our work. Stories about climate change in Jasper National Park were featured by various media outlets in relation to the Athabasca Glacier, the Chedaman wildfire, and the release of the new park management plan. 2022 won't soon be forgotten thanks to the Chedaman wildfire. On September 1st, 2022, a lightning strike sparked a wildfire high up on the slopes of Chedaman Mountain. Fueled by warm and dry weather, the wildfire eventually spread to an area of approximately 6,450 hectares. The wildfire is currently considered being held, and Parks Canada will be issuing an update on the Chedaman wildfire this month, and another update about the condition of visitor facilities and the anticipated opening dates of the Celestine Road in May. Make sure to stop by there's a wildfire risk reduction and prescribed fire table if you're interested in hearing more about fire in the park. So I'd just like to conclude here. This is the end of my review presentation. On behalf of all of the staff at Parks Canada, we look forward to continuing to work together with you in 2023 and beyond. Next, we'll move into the discussion phase of our evening. Before I pass the baton back to Jasmine, I'd just like to emphasize how pleased I am that with the new approach to our discussion, and we hope to hear a lot of different ideas from the audience today. So please take the opportunity to ask questions and share your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.